Hi, my name is Aaron Koller, and I teach here at Drisha. This week's Parashat Vayigash presents us with a absolutely stunning, remarkable turnaround in the story we've been following now for a few weeks. A teacher of mine, Hillel Nevetsky, used to talk about, I assume he still does talk about, the problem of the omniscient reader. The problem, which plagues us especially in reading stories in Tanakh, biblical stories, of knowing how everything turns out, of knowing how it ends while we're reading. And that prevents us from really understanding, from really following the twists and turns of the story and experiencing the suspense, the drama, the character development, and so on, that we would normally experience in a story. Our parasha presents us with a dramatic example of that. Vayigash elav Yehuda. Yehuda approaches Yosef. Judah approaches Joseph and asserts in bold terms his responsibility, his loyalty to his brother Binyamin. And with that, Joseph changes destiny, changes history. When we think back to where Joseph had been last week, 2 weeks ago, Joseph, of course, had been sold down to Egypt, had established himself very successful in Egypt, as Prince of Egypt, and had made absolutely no effort to be in touch with his family. In fact, he seems to have happily cut himself off from his family entirely. His first child was named Menashe, which means the one who causes to forget, and it's explained Joseph explains in the Bible that he is thanking God for helping him to forget his troubles, his toils in his father's house. The second one is named Ephraim, and he thanks God for making him flourish in his new homeland, in the land of Egypt. Joseph has moved on. He's turned the page, cut himself off, pretended that he's no longer a son of Jacob, no longer a member of the tribes of Israel, and established himself as Tzofnat Paneach, as an Egyptian prince. And then, Vayigash elav Yehuda. Then everything changes when Judah approaches him. But why had Joseph cut himself off so dramatically to begin with? I understand he didn't want to get in touch with his brothers, who after all had sold him down to Egypt. But his father, his father who was so devoted to him, who loved him more than all of his brothers, he made no effort to write a letter to tell him where he was after he gotten out of jail, after he was successful, no effort to be in touch. This is a question that was first asked by the Ramban, who has a very interesting theory about prophecy. But the answer that I'd like to dwell on here is that suggested by Yoel ben Nun, who suggested that Joseph assumed, and entirely plausibly, that his father Jacob had also been involved in his sale to Egypt. After all, he had gone to find his brothers because his father told him to. And as soon as he got to his brothers, as his father asked him, they turned around and sold him to Egypt. Joseph entirely reasonably concluded that his father and his brothers had colluded. The entire family had gotten together and decided to kick him out, to send him away, to rid themselves of the problem that was Joseph. And so he established himself in Egypt, moved on, married an Egyptian girl, had 2 Egyptian sons, although he gave them Semitic names, and flourished in his new life. When he met Binyamin, he decided to reunite with Binyamin. But that was it. He was done with being a Canaanite. He was done with being part of his family. Until Vayigash elav Yehuda. Until Yehuda approaches him, until Judah steps forward and says, I still have loyalty, I still have responsibilities for my family. Many people have talked about the transformation of Judah that's evident here. This is the same Judah who was sleeping with his daughter-in-law because he thought she was a prostitute a few chapters ago. This is the same Judah who masterminded the sale of Joseph to Egypt the chapter before that. Here Judah has radically transformed to become an emblem of responsibility, of loyalty. But no less dramatic is the transformation of Joseph. In a flash, Joseph makes a fateful decision. He decides that he can no longer stomach the idea of being separate from his family. If this is the way Judah is going to be, if this is the family that he's now presented with, maybe things were not as they seemed. Maybe he misunderstood, or maybe things have just changed. But in any event, Joseph can no longer control himself. And he cries out, Ani Yosef, ha'od avichai. I am Joseph, and my father is still alive. And in that instant, in that dramatic, emotion-laden moment, Joseph makes the decision to reunite with his family, to rejoin the family, and to once again become part of the tribes of Israel. Shabbat Shalom.